Hello and welcome to Montreal International Film Festival's talk show Insider Approach. I'm Emma. I'm joined today by Tamara Chestna, an Emmy Award-winning producer and screenwriter with over 20 years of experience in the film and TV industry. Hello, Tamara. Thank you for getting involved.
Hello, I'm excited to chat today.
Yes, we're going to be talking about your journey into the industry, what it's like to be a producer and screenwriter today, and then any advice that you'd be able to give to the next generation of filmmakers just starting out in the industry. So yeah, I thought I'd kick off by asking you then, how did you get into the industry in the first place? Take us back to the very beginning.
Well, the very beginning would be when I was in high school. I'd always loved movies and television, and I was looking for something to do over the summer in between my junior and senior year of high school. My parents found this program at Northwestern University. It's called the Cherub program, and they have a big TV and film school there. And so it was kind of like a radio, TV, and film program. And I spent 6 weeks there kind of using a camera for the first time and making my first short film with the other students. And I just fell in love with it. So I knew I wanted to follow in that path. And I went to school and studied mostly film theory and then some practical filmmaking. And then I got an internship through sort of my alumni program where like young alumni would post like, come to Los Angeles for the summer. And I happened to have a friend who had an aunt and uncle in Los Angeles, and they let me kind of stay with them. And I rode the bus around LA, which is, if you've ever been to Los Angeles, is very unusual. We're a big car city. And I had an internship there, and that was the first chance I was ever exposed to like what development is and sort of what the process is behind making a movie and all of this, like reading scripts and working with executives and all that. And I was like, this is, a part of the world I want to be in, and I want to learn how to do this. And so as soon as I graduated, I moved to LA and I started working.
Nice. All right. And so what was it like to live in LA then? Like, we think about it with like the glitz and the glam, it's a cool life. Like, what was that like for you?
So I'm from New England, and I grew up mostly in Connecticut. My family's from Boston, so I had never been to California other than this internship, and it was so exciting. The weather's great, everyone's a little more easygoing than we are on the East Coast of North America, and I felt like I was able to meet people very quickly. It's a very social business, so there are other interns and assistants in the office, so I found community very quickly. And so many people are not from Los Angeles that live here. So you kind of find this community of transplants, and everybody's in it together, and everyone has these big dreams. So I felt at home right away. I think that it's definitely a tough industry to kind of stick with, and you really have to have that perseverance to stick through it. There's this 1, 3, and 5 year rule that people told me when I first moved here, that like a lot of people come for a year and then are like, forget it, it's not for me, it's too hard. And then a few people stick around for 3 years, and then they're like, you know what, I'm going to go to law school, I'm going to go to business school, I can make more money and it's easier. And then if you can make it past that 5 year mark and just kind of hang in and keep going, your chances of making a living and having a successful career go way up. And I definitely saw the flocks of people leaving at those markers, so it was interesting, and I'm glad to say I made it past the 5 year mark.
Yeah. Okay. And so you were a development executive for several years, and then now you've moved a little bit more into screenwriting. So how was that transition from that production side into the writing side?
It's an interesting, transition to make. I had moved to Los Angeles wanting to write and direct, and I thought that was going to be my life. But like so many people, I needed to get a job right away. So I became a development assistant. And over time, just the busy nature of the business, the long hours, all the work you take home, my writing kind of kept getting pushed to the side. And so I decided at some point, I said, you know what, I could be creative as an executive, and maybe that's what I should do. So I went the executive path, was very happy for many years, but then this kind of longing inside of me for, doing more creative things. And I realized the only part of my job I liked anymore was working with writers and breaking story with them. So I did make the decision in 2015. I said, I'm gonna go for it full force. I'm quitting my day job. I'm gonna, become a professional screenwriter.
Yeah,
And
good for you.
thank you. And lucky for me, my boss at the time was very supportive. So I told him what I wanted to do and that I was going to be taking out, some scripts and taking meetings, and he let me do both for a long time. So for about a year, I was kind of straddling the two worlds. I produced a television show in Montreal for 6 months. I had a great time in your city. And I then came back from Canada and I said, you know what, I think I'm done sitting at a desk and reading other people's work. Like, I really want to do it myself. Luckily, I'd been in the business at that point for over a decade, and I had so many relationships, right? So many people that I had worked with, helped, become friends with, that I felt I had a real network to start, a career as a screenwriter where I could call people or, have generals with them, and they were rooting for me to succeed. So I do feel like I had an easier transition than some people in that way, that I had support already for career even as I was starting. But that doesn't mean there weren't lean years. The year that I got the job to write Moxie was like a very lean year, because in the end, I actually I met with Amy Poehler and her company, but I wrote the script on spec, which means I wrote it for free, knowing that she wanted to, produce it and that we would sell it together when the script was ready. So that was a big risk, and I'd only been on my own as a screenwriter for a year and a half at that point. But I was like, this is worth it. This is like it's an educated risk, right? You have someone who means a lot behind you and putting the project together. So, I just kept working and, hustling to get all those jobs.
And with screenwriting, how does that differ from like other types of script writing? Is there some knowledge or any skills in particular that you need to be able to be a screenwriter as opposed to the other types?
Yes, so I found the best training to be a screenwriter is to read a ton of scripts. So having been an assistant for years and then a development executive, I read thousands of scripts, good scripts, bad scripts, scripts in between, and learning what the difference was between them and what worked and what didn't work, and just understanding the rhythm of a movie or a TV show, if you're going into television, is so helpful, because now I feel this innate understanding of what that pacing should be, of when I need the thing to happen, of how to track story through. So I think the very baseline of being a screenwriter is to become really familiar with the art itself, right? Reading a ton of scripts. And there's so many available online now. It's so much easier for young people today to kind of start familiarizing themselves in that way.
For sure.
And then I think the other skill that you really need is just to have some life experience and some stories you want to tell, and I think that goes for obviously prose writing as well. But in screenwriting, you're kind of like, if it's a movie, what is a story I can tell in 2 hours or under? A book, you really get to explore so much more, right, of an expanse of time and characters and an internal turmoil. And in screenwriting, you really have to figure out, what is the story, and is every scene servicing that story in some way, shape, or form? It's a really economical kind of form of writing. And I think, again, it's like watching films and reading them that really helps you kind of figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Okay. And like, how do you even start writing? So you're going to be writing this film. Like, how do you begin? What's your process?
My process is to really figure out a beat sheet, have an idea, start to work through who are the characters, what is their motivation, what do they want? And then when I have a basic sense of the story, like, okay, I know I want to start here, I have an idea, I want to end here, what are we doing in the middle? And then opening up, like a Word document and just starting to write down, like, this could happen and then this could happen and this could happen. So that by the time I'm opening my screenwriting software, I have the movie kind of already in place. And then I can start writing my scenes. And of course, you discover things in those scenes as you're writing. And then you take notes like, oh, go back and set this up somewhere. This is a fun idea for this character. Let's make sure we set it up. And just kind of work it through that way. And I don't think it has to be something where you're so rigid, like, oh, well, this was in my outline, it has to be my script. No, but at least you have a place to start. Because I think it's very daunting to see a blank page and say, okay, what happens next? And another trick I would recommend for people is that if you are stuck and you don't know how to get from A to B, just keep typing. Even if it's terrible, even if it doesn't make sense and you are going to go back, and probably delete all this. Just keep going, and your brain will start to help you get there, and you'll figure it out. And sometimes just the mechanics of like, I'm just going to keep writing the scene. I don't know where we're going, but you will figure it out, and then you can go back and kind of like rework all.
Yeah. So like a lot of it is like writing, making a lot of content so that you have it to then narrow down afterwards.
Yeah.
And I imagine like these films and TV shows, they take a long time to write. So how do you stay motivated? How do you keep going?
I think for me personally, I'm very excited every time I have the idea for a new movie. And, as a working screener, often that involves pitching it to people, getting somebody on board. Sometimes you're by yourself, you're just writing for yourself. But then I have this idea, I get really excited, I have my outline, and then I start writing. I'm terrified every time that this is the day they discover I'm a fraud and I don't know what I'm doing. I can't figure it out. But that's where I think you just have to find your work ethic to just start, okay, today I'm going to write this scene, and tomorrow I'm going to write this scene, and just if you're on a deadline, creating a calendar for yourself. I'm going to write 5 pages today. Even if they're complete crap pages, I'm going to write these pages, and kind of just force yourself to go, because there's always a place where you've written, 50 pages of 110, we'll say, and you're like, I don't know if I have it in me to finish. Like I feel like I have all this down and I don't know what to do next. But again, you just go back to that foundation and you say, nope, today I'm going to write more pages. I'm going to do it. And then by the time you're hitting those last 20, you're just flying. You're like, I'm so excited to get there. I'm like, I've lived this with these characters. So it's a mixture of sort of like harnessing your enthusiasm and finding some kind of work ethic that you do in every other job, where you have to show up every day, right? You have to find time. And if you're doing this, well, you have a day job, pick your 3 nights a week. These are the nights I'm going to write. No matter what, I'm going to write a scene on these nights, and kind of just very dedicated to that. I think that's really important as like a professional screenwriter.
And like, where do you get your inspiration for all these ideas then? You've written a lot of stuff for the rom-com genre, and like there's lots of storylines that have been produced. How do you make yours like unique? How do you think of everything?
Well, I do love books. I find books and true life stories to, put your own spin on, very fun. And I think that's a great source of inspiration. I also think that there are the tried and true kind of like, we'll take the rom-com genre, for example. Like there are the tried and true tropes that work about people who, can't stand each other and then find common ground and all that. But it is true. It's like, how do you put your own stamp on it? I often draw from people I know, from things I hear that happen to other people. I try to put myself somewhere in everything that I'm writing. And I think that really helps. And I think especially for underrepresented writers, which are often like women and people of color, like there are a lot of those stories that have yet to be told. So I think if you can put yourself in there and your history, your family somewhere in there, it makes it feel different. And then you go back to the classics. I was writing something right before the current WGA strike here, and it has a bit of the While You Were Sleeping in it, that movie with Sandra Bullock from the 90s. And I just, one day I was stuck and I just opened up whatever streaming app it was on, and I sat and watched that movie and really got excited about the genre again. And even though I wasn't copying it, it did make me excited to kind of go back and be like, okay, I know how I'm going to do that now.
Okay, yeah, I see. So you're inspired by other creators in the industry as well.
Absolutely.
And then, so some of your work's been based off of previous sources, like After and Moxie. They might have been based on a novel. How do you go about that? Trying to keep it in line with the original source.
It's interesting. So I think every adaptation is a little different. You have to figure out what is the fan base of this particular adaptation? So you can take one extreme, like Game of Thrones or Harry Potter, even more so. You have such extreme fans, you really have to stick to that source material, right? And so you have to find a way to condense and bring it to life. And then you have other things, like for me with Moxie, where, the book was not a runaway bestseller that I had to worry about fans really like coming after us, but I could, there was so much to gain from the pages of the book that we really looked at it and said, what does this book feel like? What are the emotions I feel when I read the book? Okay, that we want to make sure that everybody walks away from the movie feeling. And then, we started collapsing characters or giving, we took some of the events and reworked them or changed what happened at them. We invented a storyline just to give it, often with novels, they're a little episodic where as you're telling things over a longer period of time. And again, in a film, you have to really condense it. So we're like, what could be our spine for a 2-hour story? So we created something, but we always came back to what is the spirit of the original source material? That is what has to be there. Whether that's tone, characters, the message, with After, they had a rabid fan base. And so it was really about making sure those two characters were depicted as they were in the book, and maybe not physically, but just sort of like those core characters had to exist because they went on for 4 and 5 novels. That was really important.
And you've worked with a group of screenwriters on some of your productions. So, like, how do you manage that working with others? How do you divide up the workload?
So it's interesting. Sometimes you'll have multiple writers where, like, I will come in and do, like on Moxie, I came in and was the first writer in, and we did the drafts 80s Company, and then we sold it to Netflix. And then Dylan Meyer actually came in after me, and she, did a bit more of like the choke pass, and she, reworked a story point that we had all debated back and forth. So sometimes you're like working sequentially after each other. And then other times I'm currently collaborating with 2 other writers on a TV idea. And then it's really about kind of coming up as a group with, where we want to be, what are the ideas, and then going back and forth. Some writing teams literally sit next to each other and work together and are just debating every line together. I've worked on something where, I did the first pass and sent it to the other writer. They do a pass in a different color so we know what we're changing, and they send it back. And then we got together over Zoom, and because it was the pandemic, and we read it together and just edited the script together. And then we did that a couple times, and we're like, okay, now it's done. So I think everybody has like a different working style, but I think the most important thing to leave at the door when you're working with other writers is your ego, because it has to be the best idea wins. Otherwise, you get trapped in sort of like, like a power struggle. And that's the worst thing you can do with like a writing team.
Is there anybody that you would like to collaborate with that you haven't already?
Oh, there are tons of people. I mean, there's certainly so many filmmakers I would love to work with, and producers I'd love to work with. I've been working with Hello Sunshine, which I really love. It's a production company. I would love to work with Shonda Rhimes on something. I feel like her content is something I really enjoy and have always loved watching. I'd love to do some sci-fi stuff, and I've been a huge fan of J.J. Abrams and Spielberg and Damon Lindelof and all those guys. So at some point, branching into those worlds. So there's a lot I still want to do for sure.
Yeah, that sounds cool. And then what is it like right now with the recent strike as well in the US for screenwriters? How's that for you? And what do you think the future? Yeah, what do you think the future holds for screenwriters?
Well, we're really hopeful that, especially with the solidarity we've been seeing from the Directors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, the IATSE union here in the States, all and the laborers, we've been having a moment where we're all in this together. The business is changing and has changed so rapidly with the the advent of streaming and the new way people take on content, and that has brought around like a lot of great things, and that we have more content and you're seeing more stories being told. But the model for compensation for the future of writing needs to change. And so that's a big part of why we're on strike. And we're just hopeful that if we can all band together, we can make these changes for everyone. It's one of those things where you can't have like a gas car charging at an electric station, right? So if you're like have old technology and new technology, you have to find the way to bridge the gap. And that's what we're really trying to do is say, okay, we get it. There's a new model here. We have to work together to make sure it continues to work for everybody. I do think that screenwriters will continue to be able to work when the strike is over, because we're the ones who make content. It is a blank page before we get there. And people, since the beginning of time, love telling stories, right? Like, storytelling is the oldest art form. So the way we do it happens to be in film and TV, but I think those stories are going to need to continue to be told. And I hope that we're able to kind of secure the future for the next generation of screenwriters, so that they make a living at it and not become just freelance operatives that, your dream is to write an episode of television, but you have to work 2 other jobs at the same time to be able to do it. We're really hoping that, you can make a career out of it.
For sure. No, it's all really cool that you're doing that. And then what advice could you give to the next generation then, that are just starting out in the industry?
I would say that, for screenwriters specifically, spend the time to, read a lot, watch a lot, and then work on your own craft in terms of finding your voice. Everyone is very, concerned with, how do I sell my script? And I think obviously that's important, because you want to have a career and you want to be able to support yourself. But in the beginning, really just focus on writing something that you think really represents the type of writer you want to be. Everyone talks about this intangible thing that is your voice, and that's what really matters to executives and producers and filmmakers when they're looking to hire you. So you have to kind of hone that and figure out, who are you on the page? And that may change from genre to genre, but like, through everything you write, there's a piece of you, right? There's your voice. And so, working on that piece of material, or multiple pieces of material, to figure that out, and then getting into the room with people, is going to be the most important thing. I think that, don't worry about writing something that you think, oh, this will sell because this movie did really well. Write something that matters to you, a story you want to tell. If you have some personal connection to it, great. It doesn't have to be biographical, but, if there's some piece of you somewhere in there, that really helps. And then I think getting a job while you're working on your writing, and trying to get a job somewhere in the industry, is super helpful. I was an assistant for 5 years, and I found I just understood the business so much, and it helps me so much now to understand exactly, how does a movie get made? Who are all the people, that work through that? So whether you're in an office or you're on set, like, that knowledge will really help you when it comes to your career. Because writing is not just an art, right? It's a career. You have to meet people. You have to take notes from people. You might be on set at some point. So you really have to understand it all. So I think, while some people might be like, I only want to be a writer, I don't want to work for an agent, I don't want to be a receptionist at some company, it's actually really worth your time if you can get one of those jobs for a year or two, or be on set, as a PA for a little time. I really think that is helpful.
Yeah, no, it's all really good advice, actually. And then what's next for you? What's next for Tamara Chestna? What's in the pipelines?
Well, I have another project with Hello Sunshine that we're hoping will shoot at the top of the next year, when our talent has their window, and hopefully the strike will be over. And I'm working on a short film for myself to direct, as I really want to branch into directing. And then I think, I'm really looking at, how do I expand into other genres too? So that's kind of what's on deck for me.
It's all exciting. Thank you. And lastly, then, where can people find you, on social media, if they want to get in touch and follow your journey?
I think Instagram is probably the best place to find me. I'm just at Tamara Chestna on Instagram. That's where I post everything about work and what I'm up to these days.
Oh, amazing. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.